This, my daughter, Isabella Perez. She's going to hold the mic for me. And to be quite honest, I wasn't very excited when the election cycle started. I knew I was going to vote for Bernie Sanders, but everyone told me that was a waste. Why? He doesn't have a chance. And I think we've proven the people decide who has a chance, not the political machine. Now, I understand this is not an immigration rally. I've done a lot of those. There was one here at 10 o'clock this morning. This isn't it. But immigration is one of the key issues in this election. And it's especially important for families like mine. And I say that not just as a Latina, but as a person whose husband was deported almost 3 years ago. And the last time I got behind a candidate was 8 years ago. 8 years ago, Obama spoke about the horrors of deportation. He spoke about the pain of separating families like mine. He spoke straight to the immigrant community that he would save our family. And now his presidency is almost over, and his legacy, at least with the immigrant community, is that of deporter-in-chief. He's deported almost or more than 2 million people, and thousands of families have been separated like mine or forced into exile. My husband was one of those 2 million deported, and Bernie Sanders understands that the immigration issue is more than just an invisible sand or line in the sand. We are talking about racial profiling and the criminalization of communities of color. Immigrants, both documented and undocumented, come in all shapes and colors, but the vast majority of those deported are Latinos and Middle Easterns. They're brown-skinned. My husband's first quote-unquote deportation was when he was coming in with a valid tourist visa through Dallas Airport. He was stopped by an immigration agent, not because he had done something wrong, but because he was a young, brown-skinned Latino. Had he flown in from Ireland and was blonde and blue-eyed, this story would probably have a different ending. My husband was taken into a room, stripped of his clothing and his dignity. He was interrogated for 2.5 hours, and after that, he signed his voluntary deportation order. The immigration officer went one step further and stamped his passport expedited order of removal, which sealed our doom. He had no right to go before a judge. That immigration officer was the judge, jury, and executioner. Bernie Sanders would ask for an independent oversight of DHS agencies. He would get rid of programs such as priority enforcement and our safe communities. Sanders will expand access to counsel for immigrants, and he will implement protection against coerced signing of voluntary deportation. As a politician, you can't say you're going to help pass immigration reform and at the same time accept money from the private prisons and detention centers. My husband was detained and ultimately deported in 2013, not because he was a threat to our nation, but because ICE was given a quota to meet, a number that would ensure that the private detention centers would make a profit. While he was in this detention, I spent hundreds of dollars on phone cards. Soap cost him over $5. Shampoo, over $9. Toothpaste, over $7. He signed up to work at the detention center to get 30 minutes more visitations and $3 a day wage. They still owe him for the last week he worked. They said they would send me the check, but I guess it got lost in the mail somewhere. But all that money makes profit for the private industries. And Bernie Sanders has refused to take money from those private industries. But what's even more important for families like mine is Bernie Sanders' position on reuniting families. He understands that there are some who were deported unjustly, who have families here. He talks about stopping the deportations. And everyone talks about that, but once your loved one gets deported, the organizations forget about you. Nobody's talking about my families. Nobody's talking about the deported veterans and bringing them back. Bernie Sanders is talking about that. The government now tries to keep families like mine in the shadows. They say they're only deporting felons and those who pose a threat to our national security. So when your loved one gets deported, you're afraid to come out. What are people going to think? My husband was a terrorist. He was a killer. He was a gang member. My husband was none of those. He was a number, and that is it. Your children suffer in silence. They're afraid to say anything, but I refuse to keep quiet. Bernie Sanders is the only candidate I've heard speak about reunifying families. He has said he would employ humanitarian parole to reunite families and said the U.S. must do the right thing and guarantee the swiftest possible reunification of these families, like mine. He has stated he will end the 3, 10-year, and the permanent bars. My husband has a 20-year permanent bar, not because he was a felon or a threat, but because of that expedited order of removal that immigration officer was so kind to put on his passport. My family will be voting for Sanders because my son needs his father now, not when he's 23 years old. Because exile is not an option. I call on Sanders to come to Chicago and meet not just with immigrants who are fearing deportation, but also with the families of all those who have a deported loved one and feel our pain and see what we can do to stop this barbaric injustice. Bernie for president.